Uh, Hi, everybody. I am Nicole Jackson, Director of Education at Center for Engagement, Environmental Justice, and Health, better known as CEEJH. Thank you all for joining us tonight for the second convening of our virtual advocacy training. Tonight, we hope to be able to move through a few modules for you guys to learn about the legislative process in Maryland, do a crash course in EJ 101, learn about how advocacy versus differs from lobbying, and we will learn about some of the current bills that directly impact environmental justice that are on the legislative floor as we speak. So we'll hear from some of the representatives who are, or advocates who are pushing to get those bills through both chambers of the Maryland General Assembly. That said, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Miss Stacy Hartwell. And Stacy's going to chat with us a few minutes. And then after Stacy, we will move right into my other colleague portion of the evening, Miss Vanessa Vassell, who will give us our crash course on EJ 101. And we will keep it moving and from there.
Thanks, Nicole. It's always a pleasure to be with you guys. You're such a brilliant group of people and just really in touch with everything that's happening, around environment and climate around the state and around the world, quite frankly. Hey y'all. I Again, my name is Stacy Hartwell, and when I served as the NAACP Maryland State Environmental Climate Justice Chair, we sponsored this event back in 2023 with the support of two exceptional consultants, Miss Nicole Jackson and Miss Brittany Baker. And what began as like a shared commitment to environmental justice, ensuring that no community bears disproportionate environmental harm, created space for leadership, visibility, and impact. That experience not only strengthened our advocacy, it helped propel them into expanded roles of influence, which is our hope for you in participating in this summit. Today, Ms. Jackson serves as the Director of Education for the Center for Engagement in Environmental Justice and Health under the brilliant leadership of Dr. Shakobi Wilson of Firebrand and our North Star. And Ms. Baker is now the Maryland State Director for the influential Chesapeake Climate Action Network, one of our sponsors for this event. So what began as like a collaboration has matured into a powerful institutional partnership rooted in justice and accountability. I am proud to welcome their organizations as leading partners in this summit, really. I'm also deeply grateful to our coalition partners who have shown up once again. In a political moment when environmental progress faces resistance, we refer to as the grand pause. They have invested not only financial resources, but something far more valuable, their time. And time, like clean air and clean water, is precious. Now, that's my lead in for the next talk. Speaking of clean air and water, let me share a little bit about why we're here. Environmental justice is about who breathes clean air, who drinks safe water, who pays higher utility bills, who lives next to highways, power plants, or industrial corridors, and who benefits from the clean energy economy. Protecting our air and water is not theoretical, it is urgent. As data centers multiply across our region, they demand enormous amounts of electricity and water. That demand has consequences: increased strain on our grid, greater pressure on our waterways, potential increases in emissions, threats to health and generational wealth. And too often, those impacts land in communities that are predominantly Black and Brown and already overburdened. That is why renewable energy is not optional. Offshore wind is not simply an environmental strategy, it is a public health strategy. It is an economic strategy. It is a justice strategy. It allows us to power the future without sacrificing our lungs, our rivers, or our communities. It creates great jobs. It builds industry. It expands opportunity. It ensures that clean energy transition includes us, not bypasses us. So, tonight you're not just students logging into a Zoom. You are future engineers, policy analysts, organizers, entrepreneurs, influencers, and legislators. The decisions being made right now in this legislative session 2026 about energy, climate, infrastructure will not just affect your generation, they will be carried forward by it. That is why this summit matters. HBCU students have always been at the forefront of social transformation, and we recognize your power, your intellect, your command of social media, and thereby your influence. We are here to equip you, invest in you, to lift you up, and ensure you are prepared not just to enter these spaces, but to lead them. Environmental justice will either be designed with you in mind or without you at the table. The only question is this: will you simply watch it happen or will you help lead it? Nicole?
Thank you so much, Stacy. So let's think about that. Will we watch it happen or will we help lead? So let's think about that as we go through tonight and learn about some of these bills and things that we may want to champion. Right now, we're going to turn it over to Miss Vanessa Vassell.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen and give you all a environmental justice moment so that I can center us all in what we will be discussing today. Please let me know if you have any challenges seeing my slides as they load. So thank you again and welcome. Welcome to all of our HBCU students and to our climate justice fellows, our partners, and our guests. So many of us are already working in this space, but for those who this is new to, I want to talk a little bit about what is environmental justice. You may have heard of environmentalism or environmental sciences, but this is a very unique context to what we're talking about today. So I'll give you two definitions that I personally use as my North Stars. One is from the American Public Health Association that defines environmental justice as the idea that all people and communities have the right to live and thrive in safe, healthy environments with equal environmental protections and meaningful involvement in these actions. Another definition that I often reference is coming from green action, and that is stating that environmental justice refers to those cultural norms and values, rules, regulations, behaviors, policies, and decisions to support sustainability, where all people can hold with confidence that their community and natural environment is safe and productive. So, with both of these definitions, we're not only talking about protecting Mother Earth, but protecting the people that live, work, worship, learn, thrive, dance, and raise their children on Mother Earth. And so today we will talk a lot about what it looks like for this to be available equitably to all communities. So the roots of the environmental justice terminology also come from the environmental justice movement, where a multicultural group of leaders came together and defined 17 principles that would protect people of color and fight for the destruction of inequities in their communities. I have just shown a couple of example images here on the side, one of which is here locally in Maryland, and another photo that you may have seen before and may not have known that this was a demonstration in Tennessee to protect the men at that time that were working as sanitation workers. And that is why they said, I am a man, because you're not going to treat me like trash, you're going to treat me like a man. And so instead of sharing the 17 principles, I'm going to just give you a brief summary of them, but I will drop a link so that you can reference them yourself and learn a lot more in the words of the leaders that established this movement many years ago. So, first off, respect and protecting people and the planet. Environmental justice honors the sacredness of Mother Earth and all living things and insists that everyone has the right to clean air, clean water, land, food, and healthy communities. This includes protecting workers' rights and vulnerable populations from harm. We'll talk quite a bit about the justice component, which is fairness and equity and inclusion. So, as we know from other um, intersecting movements, that justice means that policies and decisions must be free of discrimination and free of exclusion, and ensure that all voices at every stage, especially those that are closest to the problem, are greatest impacted and greatest burdened by the problem, are a part of the decision makings on the solutions. We want everyone to participate equally in shaping the future for themselves and their further generations. The self-determination and accountability component of it is also an important part of what we'll talk about today when we talk about policy, because not only should people and communities be empowered to be making political choices, economic and cultural choices for their own future, but those who are polluting, industries, corporations, those that are destroying our earth, those are the ones that need to be held accountable. It should not always be the finger pointed at citizens and communities to essentially have to bear the burden and the cost of a problem that we are not causing. The last couple of summaries that are really important to the 17 principles have to do with restorative justice and reparations. And those are very specific terms that are a part of many intersectional movements, including human rights, civil rights, and others. But in this context, environmental justice and climate justice call for the historical rebuilding and reinvestment into urban and rural communities. I'll also take a step further and say land reclamation among our indigenous communities as well as those impacted by redlining, which some of you may know is a systemic and racist policy around land and home ownership in the United States, and other forms of systemic acts of environmental racism, including things that I'm sure aren't on this slide. And last but not least, something a bit more hopeful is around our community resilience, unity, allyship, and advocacy. We each play a role, not only protecting ourselves, but our neighbors, our loved ones, our communities, future generations that are not here yet is a part of environmental justice, respecting the planet, and of course, honoring our ancestors that brought us to where we are today so that we can be a steward of this earth moving forward. So, what does that look like when we're talking about legislation? As it was already mentioned in Ms. Stacy's remarks, who has access to clean water and clean air and safe communities? Who has which communities get climate funding, get certain protections? Which communities are able to um, resist certain industries coming in and uh, certain when we talk about like data centers or we talk about certain factories, like being able to say no to those things coming into those communities, and whether and how communities are engaged in the decision making of the developments of some of these things. And to change outcomes, it's important to do what we're going to be doing today, understanding how laws are made, understanding who has the power and how we can continue to hold our own and take ours back, and how we can use our voice and our unified voice to advocate for fairness and equity. Many of you are already doing some of these things, whether you know it or not. You're engaged as leaders on your community. Pardon me, you're engaged as leaders on campus. You're engaged as leaders in your community, and you're serving oftentimes as allies and partners with others. And we want to continue to see that and encourage that following our conversation today. So that was your EJ moment. As I said, I will drop a link and some resources for you to gain a little bit more reflection if you so choose on the 17 principles. But most importantly, I want to thank you for your time and attention, and I will pass it back to Nicole to introduce our next speaker.
Thanks so much, Vanessa. Really appreciate our EJ moment. I like that we called it that. Before we move on, does anyone have any questions for Vanessa?
You're welcome to come off mute or you can type them in the chat.
Yep.
And if any questions come up later, I will put my email and you can reach out to me at any time.
All right. Thank you, Vanessa. Okay, so seeing none, we will move on. Now we will hear from our partner, um, Kristen Harberson, who is with Maryland LCV. And Maryland, I apologize. And Kristen is going to share with us about the Maryland legislative process.
Thank you so much. Let me just share my screen. Um, Not scare my sheen. And thank you so much. I am delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be part of this presentation and to be partners with CEEJH to help everybody be comfortable being part of the legislative process as a citizen lobbyist and advocate. Because if the legislators don't hear from you about what's important, they're not hearing from the most important people. Their job is to work for you, and they can't do that if they don't hear from you and they don't know what how things how bills affect you. So, as one of my uh, one of my main goals this evening is to help you become comfortable with the process. And as walking through the bill, literally how a bill becomes a law in Maryland, which is not dissimilar from the how the how a bill becomes a law on Capitol Hill that some people may remember from Schoolhouse Rock so many years ago. But there is a sort of different spirit to Maryland's law because it is compressed into what's a 90-day legislative session. Every year it's 90 days from the second Wednesday in January to the second Monday of April. 90 days is 90 days is 90 days. We are about almost 2/3 of the way through. There's 32 days left in the legislative session. So as we get closer to where we are in that process, I'll flag sort of where we are right now. But as I'm going through this process of walking through the steps of how a bill gets from being a concept to being law, I want you to pay attention and think about where the moments of engagement are, because one of the keys to successful advocacy and successful citizen lobbying is knowing who to talk to and when. And so knowing who is talking about a bill at any given time helps you to focus your advocacy to the right people. So as I say, the legislative session in Maryland is 90 days. Second Wednesday in January to the second Monday of April, we have 188 legislators. There are 47 senators, one from every district in Maryland, and every district has 3 delegates. So there are 141 delegates. I'm going to walk through using an example of a fictitious bill, House Bill 123 and Senate Bill 456, which bans cruelty to spiders. House Bill is HB is House Bill, SB is Senate Bill, and we're going to be following a House bill on this. And again, this is a fictitious bill, but everything else is for real. And the end result is that a bill has to change, and this is something to keep in mind as you're thinking about all the places where things can be changed. A bill has to pass through both chambers identically before it can go to the governor's desk. So we're going to start with a bill that's been introduced in the House Bill 123, banning cruelty to spiders. So the first step happens on the House floor. And that is literally, it's called first reader. And when they say a bill is read on the floor, it means that literally they assign it a number and they assign it to a committee. And that is first reader. there are 7 House committees. There used to be 6, but 7. They changed things up again this year. So there are 7 House committees. There are 4 Senate committees. Our bill is House Bill 123. The sponsor is Delegate Sheldon, who is a fictitious delegate. The committee is real, though, the Environment and Transportation Committee. So for environment and environmental justice, energy issues, everything goes in the House goes through the Environment and Transportation Committee. So from there, every bill that's introduced in the House or the Senate by a certain deadline is guaranteed a bill hearing. And bill hearings is when the bill is presented. The sponsor, the legislator, in this case, Delegate Sheldon, talks about the purpose of the bill. They bring in witnesses to support the bill. Other people can come in and will come in either favorable, saying that, yes, we love this bill, let's do it. Unfavorable, which is we don't like this bill, please don't let this go into law. Or favorable with amendments, which is to say, we like the idea, but we think it needs to be fixed so it can be better, because otherwise it's problem. It outlines problems that can be fixed, and so it's pushing it forward with changes. And anybody can sign up to testify. You can testify either virtually or in person. The caveat to that is that because they deal with there are something like 2,000 bills that go through the General Assembly every year. And they're not all going through the same committee, but it's still a tremendous amount of work and a tremendous amount of time for bills. And so they do limit testimony usually to about 2 minutes. And then committee members can ask questions. So in our case, the bill banning cruelty to spiders, Delegate Sheldon presents the bill with a number of witness testimony. He brought together his sponsor panel, people to support his position. The National Society of Spiders talks about how important spiders are to the ecosystem. But there was an unfavorable testimony of the company Spider Extermination. Their interest is killing spiders. So they think that spiders are scary and they should be destroyed. So they think that this is a bad bill. There's another organization, the Association of Six-Legged Creatures, which testified favorable with amendments, because what they wanted to make sure of is daddy long legs, which are not technically spiders and have only 6 legs. They needed to make sure that they are exempted. So this was it was a technical amendment, but it was an important one for them. The Department of Natural Resources offers informational testimony, which is to say they're not taking a position, they're just giving background about the program, about the bill, and about what it would mean. So that is the committee hearing. From there, it goes to, especially in the House, this is true. It's a little bit less true in the Senate. It goes to what's called a subcommittee. So there are several subcommittees in every committee that really they're the ones who really go into the nuts and bolts, the details and the nitty-gritty of the bill. They're the ones that take the favorable testimony, the unfavorable testimony, and the favorable with amendments testimony and figure out what's the right path forward. They can do one of 3 things. They can pass it favorable, they can pass it favorable with amendments, or they can pass it unfavorable. So, and sometimes it takes a couple times. So I'm just going to note that even as we speak right this minute, the Environment and Transportation Committee is working on a very complicated bill that came out of the Energy Subcommittee. That Energy Subcommittee, for the bill that they're discussing literally right this minute, has been through that subcommittee 2, 3, 4 times at this point to try to work it out, because it's an important bill, it's a big bill, it's a complicated bill, and they wanted to make sure all the pieces were aligned. So that's a subcommittee piece, and so there's a subcommittee vote. For the subcommittee for banning cruelty to spiders, the subcommittee met and decided that they agreed that daddy longlegs should be exempted, and were considered among the the daddy longlegs wanted to make sure that they were considered as part of this, that they were included among the ban to cruelty to spiders. So that they made a change to the bill that was introduced, and so their vote out of the subcommittee is favorable with amendments. So including daddy longlegs as the protected class of spiders. So from there, it goes to the full committee. And the committee, again, the subcommittee makes the recommendations, and then the full committee has a chance to vote. The subcommittee is a small group part of the committee, and so then the full committee has an opportunity to look at it and make their vote. They can also make changes. So they can take the recommendation of the subcommittee, they can make changes to the recommendation of the subcommittee, and they too can vote favorable with amendments, or unfavorable. So for our bill, the committee accepts the amendments as is. So they're not making any additional changes to the work that was done in the subcommittee. But a committee member also says that they would like to. I'm sorry. So the committee accepted the subcommittee amendment to include daddy longlegs, but a committee member has said that they think that there's a concern that maybe anti-spider repellent might be considered cruelty to spiders, and they want to make sure that that's okay. And so that amendment is also included. So this is now the subcommittee made a change, the full committee has made a change, and now the full committee is voting the bill out as favorable with amendments. So from there, it goes to what's called second reader. Second reader, again, now it's gone from the subcommittee, the smallest group, the full committee, which is a larger group, and now it's the full House floor. Second reader is when anybody on the floor of the House of Delegates can make a recommendation for a change to the bill. That there's a person called the floor leader, who is a person from the committee who answers the question, recommends whether or not an amendment that's offered on the floor should be accepted or not, and then the chamber votes on any amendment that is offered on the floor. So many times, everybody has a chance to get their bite of the apple. Everybody has a chance to make changes if they need to. So for our bill, a delegate on the floor offers an amendment that says the Department of Natural Resources really should be educating people about spiders so that they don't feel the need to be cruel to them. And this is considered what's called a friendly amendment. Nobody's fighting this one. Everybody thinks that's a great idea. So that one is accepted. Another delegate, though, says that they think that black widow spiders should be exempted from the law because they are both extremely venomous and also very scary, and so people should be allowed to be cruel and kill them. The floor leader has said, well, no, that's not really the spirit of the bill, so we are going to reject that amendment, resist that amendment. After some debate, that amendment is rejected. So they don't add that amendment onto it. So they've accepted a friendly amendment. They've rejected an unfriendly amendment. There are no more amendments that are offered. And so then the bill is what's called ordered printed for third reader. Now, at that point, third reader is the final stage of the first step of the bill. It goes through the House of Delegates. So at this point, no more amendments can be made on the House floor, but they're going to vote on the bill as it is. So people make very passionate arguments for protecting against cruelty to spiders, and some people making passionate arguments against the bill. A bill needs a majority of votes to pass, which in the House is 71 votes, and in the Senate, in the House, and 24 in the Senate. What's called, if a bill receives a higher threshold, which is 87 votes in the House and 29 votes in the Senate, that's what's called a veto-proof majority, which means there are enough votes in support of a bill that if the governor decides to veto it, then the House or Senate can override it, and it will go into law regardless. So we'll get to that a little bit later. So for our bill, there's a lengthy debate on the bill. The bill finally passes with a vote of 97 to 44 in the House of Delegates, declared pass. At that point, there's a press conference. National Society of Spiders is delighted. They have They have a press conference around the State House to talk about why this bill is so important, why they pushed so hard on it. They thanked the legislators. They brought school children in talking about holding pictures of their favorite spiders. One of the children wears a spider costume, and Delegate Sheldon tells a story about his childhood pet tarantula named Scooter. This is a really important piece because this is, again, where the public is engaged. This is an important part of keeping the momentum up. So we want to be thanking legislators when they do good things, so that we can to encourage them to do more, and it helps build momentum for the program. So again, I'm hoping that you're seeing all the places where you as advocates can get engaged in the process. So all that happens, has to happen before what's called crossover. Crossover this year is March 24th, so we're a little bit over a week away. And that is the 69th day of the session. And at crossover, a bill from the House, after crossover, bills from the House are taken up by the Senate, and bills from the Senate are taken up by the House. And I want you to think about this for a second. Up till this point, it has taken 69 days to get to this point. There are 21 days left after crossover. And then we're going to have to go through the same process again in a very compressed fashion. So you have opening day. There are different benchmarks between opening day and crossover, where deadlines for bills can be introduced. But day 63, which again, we're getting pretty close, that is Monday, I believe, is the last day the bill can be introduced into the full chamber for second reader, to make sure it what's called makes crossover, which meets that crossover deadline. And from there, you have 21 days to go through the entire process again in the second chamber. First reader, second reader, third reader. And so it becomes, from that point on, it becomes manic. So the bill is read in the second chamber. The bill number and sponsor are announced. It's assigned to a committee. In this case, because it's such a compressed timeline, they don't necessarily always have a bill hearing in the second chamber, especially if the bill has been introduced, if a counterpart bill has been introduced in the Senate as well. In our case, we're going to say that there wasn't a Senate bill. Senate Bill 456 wasn't introduced in the Senate, so they might have a full bill hearing for the House bill, because the Senate needs to know everything you need to know about it. So they go through a full hearing. If there had been a Senate bill, they would have just had the sponsor of the panel from the House, sponsor of the bill from the House, would come across, would talk about the bill that they'd already heard from the Senate version, talk about the changes that were made, and then it goes from there. Now, if the bill has already been heard in the second chamber, they don't even have to go a hearing. They might just put it right to a voting session, again, because they're trying very hard to get through a lot of things in a very short time. So our committee has for our bill, there's a sponsor-only hearing. Only Delegate Sheldon speaks. Everybody is able to submit written testimony. Again, you can submit written testimony or verbal testimony. Written testimony is always welcome. So the chairman of the Senate committee says they don't need to discuss it in subcommittees, so that's just going to move to a full committee for votes. During the discussion during the voting session, though, one of the senators raises the concerns about that education program that was added on the floor of the House about helping people understand that spiders are not scary. So they say, well, yeah, that's going to be too expensive, and so the Senate committee votes to remove that provision. So the committee, again, is voting favorable with amendments. They have the same option of favorable, unfavorable, or favorable with amendments. So goes back to the Senate, to second reader in the Senate. Unlike the first chamber, though, in the second chamber, they can make amendments at any point in the process. They can make amendments in the committee. They can make amendments on the second reader and they can make amendments on the third reader. If at this point the bill has not been changed, then it could go straight to the governor's desk at this point. But in our case, amendments have been made, so it's going to have a longer process. So the Senate accepted the committee amendments to the House bill. They haven't, and on second reader, they don't have any changes. But the next day, when it's on third reader, one of the senators has an idea that they really had some questions, and they heard that conversation. They heard about the amendment that had been offered and rejected in this House about black widow spiders, and they want to take that up again. So, and in the Senate, that amendment, there's debate, and the Senate amendment is accepted on the floor. So now the Senate has made an amendment to the floor as well. So if that hadn't happened, the bill, if none of these changes had been made, the bill would go straight to the governor's desk. As it is, the Senate has made many changes, and so back to the House it goes. So this is what's called concurrence, and this is because it becomes harder at this point for people to get engaged because these things happen very, very quickly. The bill is sent back to the first chamber, and the committee, in this case, the Environment and Transportation Committee, has to vote to concur, which is to agree, or not concur, to not agree to the changes that were made across the street. If the committee votes to agree, then the bill is sent to the floor, everything is done and dusted, and it can go to the governor's desk because it has passed the House and the Senate in the same posture. If the committee votes not to concur, then it goes back across the street to the Senate. So at that point, the second committee has a chance to reconsider. So the Senate committee can agree that to back off from the changes they made, which is to recede, or to say, no, we're standing with our changes. Those were the right decisions. And so they don't recede. If the committee votes to recede, then again, it goes back to the full floor and they vote it, and then it can go to the governor's desk. If they don't, then it is assigned to what's called a conference committee. And I think of this like, the Sharks and the Jets from West Side Story meeting under the bridge. 3 members from each committee are assigned to meet for a compromise. And they may decide some, all, or none of the amendments. At this point, it's a little bit up in the air. They can do a lot in the conference committee. Anything they can do to come to agreement where everybody from both the House and the Senate agree to the changes. If the conference committee gets to an agreement, they go back to each side simultaneously, and both committees and then both floors vote to accept the agreed upon bill. So for our bill, the Environment and Transportation Committee voted not to concur. The Education and Energy Environment Committee voted not to recede. The Conference Committee met and found a compromise. The compromise they find is that they removed the educational program that the House had added on the floor, but they didn't accept the Black Widow exception, which the Senate added on the floor. Both the House and the Senate agreed on the compromise bill, and it went to the governor's desk. So this was a happy ending, and they were able to find a compromise. Finally, it comes to the governor's desk, and I realize I have a typo. The governor has 3 options. He can either sign the bill, and then it goes into law, with the Senate president, the Speaker of the House, in a great ceremony. He can veto the bill, which means he has to provide justifications for why he did it. This may or may not be done in public. Sometimes if it's a big deal, he'll make a declaration, he'll have a speech about it. But often it's just in writing. He will veto it and send it back. The other thing he can do is let it go. He can say, he can just ignore it. And if he ignores it and he does nothing with it, it still goes into law. But there's no ceremony, of course, because he's not signing it or vetoing it. In this case, the governor signs the bill into law. Hooray! Delegate Sheldon is there, standing behind the governor with the National Society of Spiders. The kids who came to the press conference, including the one who dressed as a spider. Pens are handed out. The governor signs with one pen. The speaker signs with another pen. The president with a third pen, and they all give out the pens, and it's a big deal. There's pictures taken, which the Society for the National Society of Spiders can put in their newsletter to say, look at what we've done. At 11:59 on the 90th day of the General Assembly adjourns sine die. It literally means without date. So they're closed, it's the end of their days. It's the end of their session. They will not come again together for another 275 days. I will say, sine die is a day of madness. It can be very celebratory. I think this year, especially because it's the end of a 4-year term, will be especially celebratory, a little bit bittersweet, because some people know that won't be coming back the next year either because they've chosen to retire, or maybe some of them might be facing stiff elections and may not come back because they won't get reelected. So it's a big day of celebration. Advocates, legislators, staff are all over town, seeing each other, getting ready to say goodbye. But it's also a day with a lot of work getting done. They go into off in the floor over and over and over again. But at 11:59, they gavel out, and that's it. They go back to their home. They go back to their jobs that they've left for 90 days, their families who they've barely seen for 90 days, only to return again, hopefully 270 days later. And so that's it. That's the process. And I will leave these final thoughts of that your job is never to change anybody's mind. It's to give them information and the space to change their own mind. And I'll just reinforce what I said at the beginning. Yours is the most important voice that they can hear. You don't have to be an expert in everything about a bill. They can find experts. There are people like me whose job it is to bring experts and connect them to give the information. But what they cannot get from anybody but you is your story and why bills are important to you. What will this mean for you and your family and your community? And those stories are the most important ones they can hear. Those are the stories that make the difference. Those are the stories that can lead them to change their mind and to change their perspective, especially when you're talking about something as deeply personal and as deeply rooted in people's lives and communities as environmental justice legislation. Those are the stories that are meaningful. So that's what I got for you tonight. And I'm very happy. I've gone through this very quickly, but I'm very happy to answer any questions. I'll put my contact information in the chat. If anybody has any questions that they think of later, I'm happy to answer them now or later.
Thank you so much, Kristen. We do have a little time for you to answer questions now if students have them. I do want to interject slightly and say for our students who are from Bowie, Coppin, Morgan, and University of Maryland Eastern Shore, please do so right now. In the chat, send Brittany Baker with CCAN your email address so she can process your gift cards before we end tonight. Thank you. So any questions for Kristen?
Well, if nobody has any questions, again, I'm very happy. Please, the other thing I'd leave you with is that nothing in Annapolis happens alone. Everything is done by teams. No individual legislator can pass a bill by themselves. No individual advocate can get a bill passed on their own. We all have to work together. We work as teams, we work as communities, we work in partnership. And I want you to always consider me as your partner, as Maryland LCV as your partner. We want you to be successful. We want to help you be successful advocates. And so I mean it very seriously when I say please be in touch with you. Please be in touch if we can ever be of any service to you, if I can ever be of any help to you. I'm eager to do so. I am on your team. So with that, I really appreciate your time and I really appreciate your intention. And I hope that you have the most successful lobby day ever. And I'll look forward to seeing you in Annapolis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristen. We are going to take a 10-minute break. So oh, sorry, go ahead. There, I see a hand raised. ZM, please share your name before your question.
It's Z. And a question I have for Kristen is, although it might not always be necessary, just thinking of procedure, any advice on how someone could get solid practice on Robert's rules? Because, as obviously we're on the different side of this, but, sometimes it matters in the process. Or
That is
how
a
have you learned it?
that is a superb question. I'd say I mean, how I learned it is so I was raised by political scientists. So I think that Robert's Rules was, I read with Dr. Seuss. Um, but and but more and more directly, I worked for 5 years as staff for the General Assembly. So I learned uh, from being a staff on a committee. It was, in fact, what was then the Environmental Matters Committee is now called Environment and Transportation, the process of things from the inside. So that's where I got my crash course in how Annapolis works. This is my 16th legislative session. It's my 11th session as with Maryland LCV, and I'll say that every single year I learn new things about the process. It's They do have rule books for the House and the Senate. It's not it's they follow Robert's rules to a degree. But I think that I don't actually know how to answer your question except to say uh we you're going through the process and you learn it that way. And one of the things I wanted to walk through sort of literally the step by step is so you can see how the process builds. So I'm not actually answering your question, but I'm happy to nerd out about this any old time you want. And people who know me long, have known me for any length of time, know that I mean it.
Thank you. So I'm just hearing it's a lifelong learning is the key.
It
And
is
just practice
no, it's not practice. I don't think you can practice it,
or
but I think,
use, like you just have to be
yeah,
in it.
you just have to be in it. And I don't want you to have to feel like you have to worry about that when you're going in to be a citizen lobbyist. From your perspective, Robert's rules is not like that's not something that you need to worry about. All you need to worry about is how to tell your story and who you're telling your story to. Are you is the Where is the bill at the time? Is it in subcommittee? So do you want to be talking to the people in the subcommittee? Is it in the full committee? Do you want to be talking to the full committee? Is it in the House, the full chamber? Do you want to be talking to everybody? Right. So that's really all you need to know to do the work that you need to do. It feels intimidating and it feels like you need to know like codes, language. But I want to tell you that you don't. And the more you just I think if you were to go if you go to Annapolis and you sit in the legislative office, you will learn that it's just a conversation, and no protocol is required. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Any more questions for Kristen before we take a 10-minute break?
And I did share the draft of the slides and sort of an outline of what I just talked about. So please be in touch if you have any questions. Thank you so much, everybody. It's really
Thank
a
you so
delight to
much.
be with you. I appreciate all the work you do.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Really quickly. Okay, so it is 6:29. We are going to take a 10-minute break. Everyone come back at 6:39. Um, while we are taking a break, I am going to play a lovely song for everyone to hear during the break. Where is Stacy? I wanted to find Stacy so she could give us some background in this song. Give me one second.
Do you want me to say it before or after?
Oh, you could say it right now while I'm pulling it up if you want.
Hey everybody. One of our community advocates, a longtime advocate, Miss Elizabeth Johnson, she is very much involved in housing equity for the state of Maryland as well as in Prince George's County. Her son is also a musician, and he's gotten many awards and that sort of thing, local awards for his music that he's written. And she collaborated with him on this song. And I think it's a really fantastic song and it really meets the moment that we're in. And I'm so glad that Nicole decided to share it with you. I hope you like it.
Thank you, Stacy. Um, are you able to play it from your end? I'm having
Oh,
trouble
oh,
logging into my Spotify.
okay. Well, I will try. I'm not as nimble as you guys are with this. Let's see. So do I just play it? How does it?
Yeah, well, I think you need to share sound.
Oh, now how do you do that? Do you want
Let's
to put
see.
the
What's it? Can you tell me the name of the song again so I can make sure I have it queued up?
the people are the power?
People are the power. All right. I think I have it queued up here.
Oh, okay, because I could send you the hyperlink.
Yeah,
Put it in
that's what I was
chat.
looking for, the hyperlink.
You
Thank
want to put
you.
that in chat?
Nope, I found it now.
Oh, well,
Appreciate you.
I did my best.
All right. Share sound. There we go.
This is order. This is truth. Yeah. Okay. Hey. Who decides if the rain stay fair or rise? Who decides if the water's clean or dries? Who decides what the children get taught every rule you live by? Somebody fought for. From the blocks outside to the courthouse doors, every vote decides who gets less or more. Checks get skipped, schools get cut, while pockets stay safe and the people get stuck. Here's the truth they don't repeat enough. Every seat they hold was built by us. They don't own power, they least that bold, and least authority can be controlled. People are the power. That's me and you. People are the power. Every voice is true. We raise them up, we shut them down when the people move. Even power goes down. The people are the power. Say it now, say it now. When we stand together, we run this town. We run this town. Foreclosed homes, polluted land, education stripped by a business plan. They call it numbers, we call it lies when decisions getting made from the wrong side. Young and old, different shades, same struggle, same stage. When we alive, they feel the shivers. One clear voice is all there is. It feels unity more than protest noise. Made fear when the people know their voice. Authority bends when the truth begins, and silence breaks when the people step in. The people are the power. That's all right. The people have the power. Stand up, it's time to fight. The people are the power. We'll talk truth, not fear. When we both rest, one our voices are clear. This is our design. This is our design. people stare. How to return will we take command? Many voices, one direction. Collective will is correction. They feel the sound of grounded souls who know their worth and know their role. People are the power. Every generation. People are the power. Our vision of the nation. People are the power. My members are around. You want them in. You turn them loud. Living through the law. Where the people move together. Nothing stand at all. People are the power. 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 Never forget.
Oh, I don't know if we want to play that. Oh, you got it in time. Great. Yeah, I just think that's so meaningful because we really forget the power that we have. And our vote means something, and our voice really does. I had one legislator say to me when I first started doing this kind of work, if they hear from six people, that's how low the bar is. If they hear from six people, they know that something is an issue in their community. So, if we would just lend our voices, it doesn't take long. They don't let you talk long anyway. But if you could lend 2 minutes to the legislative process, it really goes a long way.
Thank you so much, Stacey. We have a few minutes left on our break, and we'll all be back momentarily. All right, all right, all right. Welcome back. I hope everyone had a good break, that we all got our students got their gift certificates so they can order their yummy snacks for the rest of the session. And we are going to move forward with some bill education right now. So we will hear over the next 40 minutes from local advocates and CEEJH staff who will be telling us and sharing with us about current bills that are in the Maryland legislature. Excuse me, in the Maryland legislature. And up first, we are going to hear from the chair of the Zero Waste Committee with Maryland Sierra Club, Miss Martha Ainsworth. And Martha's going to share with us about the bottle bill.
Hey, load that up. Thanks for the introduction. Let me screen share here. So folks, I'm like Nicole said, I am the chair of the Maryland Sierra Club's Zero Waste team. And the Sierra Club is probably the largest and oldest environmental grassroots organization in the U.S., going back to the late 1800s. But I wasn't around then. I'm going to talk with you about the Maryland Bottle Bill today, and it's also called, the formal name is Beverage Container Recycling Refund and Litter Reduction Program. So the objective of the Maryland Bottle Bill is to reduce beverage container litter and plastic pollution. And you can see in this lower left corner, that's a cleanup of a trash trap in the Anacostia River. And there's 12 bags of bottles and cans from the river, and all the other trash is just 2 plus a little bit of styrofoam. That's the real impact of litter here on our waterways. Look over the far right, you see the District Heights cleanup. Basically half of the cleanup by volume is beverage containers. So more than 5.5 billion beverage containers are sold in Maryland every year. Only about a quarter of them are captured for recycling, and that leaves 4 billion in the environment every year. They're either littered, they're in landfills, or they're incinerated. And you probably heard a lot about plastic pollution and marine life, but now, these plastic bottles do break down into smaller pieces, the microplastics and nanoplastics. They're ingested by wildlife. but they also move up the food chain to people. That over the last year in particular, scientists have been studying the impact of microplastics on human beings. They found it virtually every human organ, including the brain. So this is the reason why we want to capture those beverage containers and put them to good use. It's a huge waste of resources also. If you think about 3/4 of the beverage containers that are sold end up as wasted, either as litter or as in trash. We could be reusing those materials. That would reduce the demand for virgin materials and all the greenhouse gases that are spent extracting new minerals or fossil fuels to make the plastic. At every stage of the life cycle of plastic, there's a lot of greenhouse gas emissions and harm to human beings involved. So let's see. So how does this program work? Here we go. So the way this works is that a small refundable deposit is added to the price of beverages in glass, plastic, and metal beverage containers, either 10 cents or 15 cents, depending on the size of the beverage container. And you get 100% of your deposit back when you bring it to a convenient retailer. And that's the most convenient place to turn it back, is a place you normally shop, or a redemption facility for recycling. This is why they call it a recycling refund. You will be buying the beverage. Think of it as buying the beverage, but borrowing the container. Years ago, it's ancient history for most of you, but in the 1960s and early 70s, there were only glass bottles, and they were returned. If you return them after using them, you got money back from the distributor, and they were refilled and reused, put back on the market. So that's what we're interested in doing. So eventually, the program is going to be implemented and financed by beverage producers. Those are the brand owners. You think about the brand on your beverage containers, with strong oversight from the Maryland Department of the Environment. Now, these programs are the most effective policy known to prevent litter. When you assign a value to a used beverage container, fewer people litter or discard them in the trash, and those who find them on the roadside, they collect them for the refund. In fact, in the 10 bottle bills, states in the U.S. states that have bottle bills already, people often donate their beverage containers to charity to cash in on the refunds. The programs in these 10 U.S. states have been operating for decades. The very first was in 1970, and they're spreading across the globe as a major intervention to prevent plastic pollution. The program launch would be January 2029. That would be if the bill were to pass this year. On the upper right here, you see a reverse vending machine. You can put your beverage containers in one at a time. It verifies that it's a container that had a deposit on it. It counts them up. It calculates how much that you're owed, and you can take the little slip that comes out to the checkout and get your money. Or you could put them in a bag drop in the lower right, put all your cans and bottles in there. You get your own barcode, personalized, stick it on that bag and put it in there, and you have an account, and they will count them for you and deposit in your account all of the refunds that you're owed for those beverage containers. So those are examples of the kinds of technologies involved. So what benefits to expect? Okay, there's a target, an enforceable target in this bill, that they have to get 90% of the beverage containers sold in Maryland back. And that means an additional 3.6 billion beverage containers will be removed from the environment in Maryland. 2.3 billion of them are plastic bottles. Think about all these beverage containers going into the Chesapeake Bay. It's really hard, really breaks your heart. You're going to get a very large reduction in litter. 70 to 84% is typical. We're going to have probably a higher redemption rate than other places, so you can expect at the higher end of that, it's going to be related plastic pollution from the plastic bottles. It's going to also drop. We're going to get, one of the great things about bottle bills is that the stuff isn't being commingled with something in your curbside bin. It's not getting contaminated by detergents and other stuff that you put in there. So these food grade quality materials are kept separate, and they can become beverage containers again really, really quickly. So they're very, very high quality. And you can see an example of the glass bottles there in that middle picture. There's going to be cost savings think about all the beverage containers we're paying to landfill or money we're spending on cleanups. That's going to be saved for local governments, and Maryland taxpayers will be reduced. We'll have new jobs. Those reverse vending machines require a lot of maintenance. Also more jobs in recycling, and we'll have a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and energy use. So next slide. What about the environmental justice impacts? So plastic beverage containers are particularly bad for environmental justice communities. They're made from fossil fuels. They emit greenhouse gas emissions and harmful chemicals at every stage of their production. Most of the extraction, the processing, and the production of plastic is next to adjacent environmental justice communities. They're very hard hit. They endure adverse health impacts. You've probably heard of Cancer Alley in Louisiana, a really unfortunate situation. And also EJ communities are more severely affected by litter. Since the bottle bills reduce dependence on virgin materials, and you can just reuse the same materials, there are fewer greenhouse gas emissions, fewer plastic bottles being burned in incinerators, and people downwind suffering the consequences, and then new jobs and income opportunities for low-income communities. I think one more. So the status of the Maryland bottle bill. It's been introduced. One thing that Kristen didn't mention is that it's pretty unusual for a complicated bill like this to pass in one session in only 90 days. There are a lot of stakeholders. So the very first time we put this in the hopper was in 2023, just on the House side to see where all the stakeholders stood on it. And then in the second year, we had a bill in both the House and the Senate side. And last year, we had great momentum. We've been working as a coalition of 24 environmental, civic, faith, and civic and faith organizations. We had a public opinion poll done last year of Maryland voters, and 90% of them support the bottle bill with a 10-cent deposit that's paid for by beverage companies and not the taxpayers. It passed the House Environment and Transportation Committee, went through the subcommittee, like Kristen said, and it got to the House committee 17-6, but there was a second committee and they decided to just not hold a vote. So that's where we left last time. This year we have the same committee assignments. Every year, if you reintroduce it, it has a different bill number, by the way. It doesn't keep the same. And every year you have to start all over again from scratch. So that's quite unfortunate. But now we've had good hearings and we're preparing amendments for the Environment Subcommittee work session. One of the things you can do to help out is scan that QR code on the right. And that is an action alert that goes to your delegates, state senator, and the governor. So these are all the groups that are in our coalition. I just want to say that we really could use your help to get the bill through all these committees in the floor, in the House and Senate. The very first attempts to pass a bottle bill in Maryland were back in the 1970s, believe it or not. There are some mighty opponents, including the beverage companies themselves, that don't want to have to pay for it. So it is hard to get them through. We know we have a major litter and plastic pollution problem, a growing public health problem due to microplastics, a highly effective solution that makes the beverage producers responsible for fixing it. And it's actually affordable because the customers get a refund for returning their containers, and it reduces costs for taxpayers and local governments, and it has overwhelming public support. So we really can't afford to wait at this point. We need to pass the bottle bill now. Our motto is earn cash for trash and lose the litter. Every year we wait 4 billion more containers enter the environment. So thanks for your time. And if there's time for a question or two, I'd be glad to answer. And these are bottle bill earrings.
Thank you so much, Martha. I see a question from Appreciate. Did I say your name correctly?
Yes, you did. But I
Okay.
was wondering, so the machine for the bottles, you guys already have like a prototype for it?
So those are being used all over the world. They're called reverse vending machines, and they're one of several different kinds of ways of redeeming your containers to get the money back. Yeah, they're used all over the U.S. It's the company called Tomra that makes them mainly.
I was
They
about to
also,
say that's really cool. Like I like the idea.
yeah, it's hard to just bring one down here because they're they're about the size of a, well, you saw about the size of a refrigerator. But there aren't any states around Maryland that have had bottle bills. I don't know if any of you have ever lived in states that have a bottle bill, but it's like California, Oregon, Hawaii, Michigan, Iowa, Maine, Vermont, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York. Did I get all 10? I can't remember, but those are all states that have bottle bills, and most of them had them for decades. And it just becomes people's behavior changes. You know, there are a lot of naysayers that, oh no, that's, California, that's Oregon. We can't change, but um, people do change when they have the financial incentive to do it in particular, and you see immediate results. You'll see an immediate change in the amount of beverage containers on the side of the road. They'll just totally disappear. Any other questions?
Thank you so much, Martha. Any other questions for Martha before we move on? Going
No, but
once.
I did want to say thank you for answering my question.
Oh, thank you for asking it.
Thank you.
There were some materials attached to the agenda, I believe, right, Nicole?
Yes.
And so in there, you'll find a fact sheet on the bill. And there's also two short videos I want to recommend. One of them is from Connecticut, where they just raised the deposit level from 5 to 10 cents and doubled the number of reverse vending machines. It's how I earned $23 in 5 minutes. And the other
Yeah,
one
it's
is
really
a
cool.
12-minute documentary of how Coca-Cola destroyed the reusable glass bottle. And they knew it was going to create, when they started using single-use containers, that was going to create a huge, huge cleanup, litter, trash problem at the other end. But they did it anyway. And now we have this huge problem with litter
Yeah,
and
thank you,
trash.
Martha. So maybe before you hop off the call, if you're not able to stay with us, you could put the links to those videos right in the chat, and folks can grab them right away and maybe look at them right after the call. Um,
Okay, I'll put them in the chat. Thanks for that suggestion.
You're welcome. So next up, we will have hear from Mr. Frederick Johnson, who is our policy and research specialist, sorry, here at CEEJH. And Frederick is going to talk with us about the CEEF bill. CEEF is Strategic Energy Investment Fund, and the Cherish Our Act bill, which is a cumulative impacts environmental justice bill. And that one is like one of my favorites. I'm most excited about that one.
It is so difficult to turn on the mic when you're sharing screen. Hello, everybody. As Ms. Jackson said, I'm Frederick Johnson, the policy specialist and research analyst for CEEJH, and I'm going to be highlighting two different bills: the Cherish bill, which focuses on cumulative impacts, and the CEEF bill, which is the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. Going into Cherish, I want to make sure that we're being cognizant that we had to break up Cherish into two separate bills this year. And the previous years we've been able to coalesce them as one, but it was recommended by one of our partner agencies, the Department of the Environment for Maryland, that it might be easier and more sufficient for us to break them into two. Or did recommendations. Just to give you context about my background, I'm an urban planner by trade that studied environmental law, as well as analyzing how we can cultivate more equitable spaces and being more cognizant in our placemaking strategies as community, as well as trying to figure out how do we leverage the private sector to be in alignment with our goals when we think about sustainability, anti-displacement, and health holistically. So first thing I want to highlight is the difference between a vulnerability and a stressor. When we think about vulnerability, that the way I analyze it or the way I see it is the proximity of a community or the proximity of an urban environment being close to a coastline, for example, or when we think about what happened in Altadena in Pasadena in California, an area that's vulnerable to what a wildfire could look like if it's being impacted. A stressor, I look at more of what the impediments could look like when we think about the built environment on a community. So, a pipeline being built in proximity to a community, a brownfield being in proximity to a community, a data center. It could add more stress to a nearby community when we think about energy ratepayers, when we think about groundwater quality or the potential for groundwater to be contaminated, that is also something that be considered. The reason why I want to make sure I'm highlighting both of these is because when we think about cumulative impacts, vulnerability and stressors are both considered. However, we were explicitly using the word vulnerability within the Cherish Act language, but it still is considered within the full scope of cumulative impacts. We just had to be explicit about vulnerabilities in the bill language that we chose. So HB 1287 is meant to, the highlighted portion is the point of emphasis, necessity for certain generating stations located within a certain at-risk area to include with the applications a baseline understanding of risk disparities, environmental needs, or what we're calling a burden report. When we're doing the assessment of different states, New Jersey, Minnesota, California, and even Illinois, even though Illinois wasn't successful with their cumulative impacts bill, there was this intention on making sure that any new renewable permit or any new facility being proposed took the time to do a due diligence of what scale of pollution occurred on the parcel, as well as what current or historic scales of pollution have happened across the past decade or decades for that matter. The reason why this is important is because we have to be cognizant that when developers, most likely industrial developers, are prioritizing project on a specific parcel of land, it's most likely because they're saying it's feasible there. And usually the history of development in this country is that they're going to build projects in areas or communities that are more affordable. And most of the time that is in areas and communities that look like ours. So the burden report gives a idea as well as a projection to the developer of what the anticipated pollution could look like, as well as informing the community and legislators who are going to be voting on these projects that, okay, this is the experience that communities have gone through. This is the research we have done. This is the project we're proposing. And hopefully, now after they do their own due diligence, they see that, okay, maybe we need to develop in a more sustainable fashion. Maybe we need to incorporate more energy generation that is cleaner. Maybe we need to make sure that, if we're talking about development that might be along a port, we might need to prioritize different trucking routes that is not going to be further impacting the air pollution or air quality for communities that are living in this proximity to our project. The next bill is the Cherish 1268, and this is focused on permitting. The short version of this is that when Department of Environment recommended that we broke them up, it was to make sure that it would give us enough latitude to pick which permits would be the most, not just the ones that would be the most renewed, but the ones that we could identify as the ones that are being continuously presented in environmental justice communities. To share some information that we've just worked on in these past couple of days is that now what we've been able to work with the final draft of Cherish is that we're going to be prioritizing Cherish to be included in any new projects. However, it was recommended by many public municipality partners that we need to ensure that any public projects are not impacted by Cherish. Their arguments were that it would provide an impediment, that if these projects had more red tape, it may impact public utility that is needed to support the density or the anticipated density of the state. Something that our executive director, Dr. Wilson, has made very clear, and something that is also echoed through much of what urban planning has has supported through environmental justice, is that most of the time, many of these public projects are the same ones that are furthering or hindering the health of communities that have been disproportionately impacted. So at some point, we need to analyze and regulate public projects at the same or even a higher scale as private projects. And when we think about regulation, mismanagement is something that is echoed as well. When we think about projects that have just not met the standard, when we think about the emissions that are being presented or emissions that are emitting, as well as making sure that they're designed in a way that is environment and community first. The goals for Cherish is a collective assessment of pollution impacting vulnerable communities, to establish regulatory processes, to ensure community involvement is within decision making, and a collective land use and zoning practice that prioritizes the public health and ecology of Maryland. Once we're able to get Cherish across the finish line, the next step is making sure that the comprehensive plan bill that is being presented to the state of Maryland is going to incorporate an implementation strategy on maintenance and identifying, hopefully, land that is not going to, like I said before, further exasperate the public health of environmental justice communities throughout the state. The achievable goals is something that aligns with our collective policy agenda. But one thing I want to make sure I highlight is our role here at CEEJH, and that's convening policy workshops like the one we're in, partnering, collaborating with great minds like yourselves, and continuously partnering with different grassroots organizations to make sure that the testimonies that they're sharing are being highlighted and they're equipped to advocate at the highest level possible. Because as we all know, we can do as much work as possible, but we need to make sure that the communities we represent and support are also in position to advocate for themselves. We're going to go into the next. So the Strategic Investment Energy Fund is HB 1040. And the way I look at strategic energy investment energy funds, or CEES for that matter, is more of a statewide program that community land trusts operate in on a micro level. So COTs have operated as a space to receive funding when a culprit or when an emitter is being fined for not operating as a good neighbor, and those fines are collected as those funds are collected by a COT. The cease, on the other hand, that E is supposed to be in front of the I, but that's a typo. My apologies for that. The CEEF, on the other hand, the way we're approaching it for the state of Maryland is making sure that there's a baseline scale of funding that can never go lower, just to make sure that we do have energy projects made available and could be funded immediately. And that baseline number is $365 million, shown right here. So if CEEF's money makes Maryland energy more affordable, cleaner, and reliable through programs offered by state agencies. So if we're looking at both of these bills working in tandem, let's say the state wants to prioritize energy farming, and whether it's offshore or solar or hydro, if those projects could be funded by a CEEF. However, now that with the final draft of the Cherish bill, they're not going to have to be responsible for doing a burden report. Their permits that they're going to be applying for are not going to be impacted in regards to further regulation. And we can streamline a clean energy project that, again, makes sure energy is more affordable, cleaner, and reliable. The bill allocates mandatory funding. This is the 5 different programs where allocation is needed for. One thing I want to highlight is that after having a meeting with that went over the comprehensive plan, the comprehensive plan for the state, what we're seeing is that we're prioritizing transportation as it relates to homes to make sure that we're able to have enough capacity for the density that's being anticipated. What that looks like physically is this term called mixed use, where you're going to have most likely a commercial space on the first floor, and then on the second to fifth floor, you're going to have residential, and this is going to be located in a major fairway. So this most likely could be in proximity to a train station or train stops, metro stops, and so on and so forth. So we can encourage more walkability within our communities, as well as making sure that we're engaging with space in a more cognizant way. My pushback on this is that usually when we hear these terms, it's going to be done at a market rate level. And it's not, when we think about implementation, we have to make sure that the communities that have experienced the scale of disinvestment are now able to profit without being displaced. And the same thing goes for schools as well, making sure that education is affordable, accessible across the state. The bill prioritizes assistance and equity for households, income-based, bill relief, and targeted efficiency. The last point, 35% of the efficiency funds are for conservation. When we think about conservation, this is, again, making sure that we can serve communities that have historically been present and making sure that they're able to benefit from all of this funding that's coming into the areas where they've been generational residents. One of the main things that we're seeing across the country when we think about green workforce development is making sure that any projects being presented are local hires, coming from the city of Los Angeles, where I worked in council and the planning department, or adjacent to the planning department, is this concept called target local hire, TLH. This means that any projects being presented from a public municipality has to hire 80% of its workers. I think it was 75% when I was working in the city. 80% of its workers have to live within a 50-mile radius. And one thing, again, for a little pushback, is that we have to make sure that it's not residents who just moved into our communities, right? It has to be residents that have been living there and now are in positions to be hired so they could be parts of the solution for our areas and our neighborhoods. Business growth as well. When we think about special funds for support small minority-owned, women-owned businesses. Again, when we think about economic diversity, when we think about economic justice, all of this can be accomplished and could be achieved through strategic and intentional development and policies like this one, so that we could allow the path to be led by those who have the vision for what their community should look like. We can't incorporate or encourage more sustainable or more environmentally just environments without making sure that the people who have experienced the injustice for decades are now at the forefront of these solutions. The other key mandatory allocations, some go to clean energy, microgrids, smart energy communities, offshore wind, workforce development, like I mentioned before. One thing I would like to highlight for this slide is that the microgrid, for me, is one of the potential solutions when we think about energy resilient, energy justice within our communities. At some point, when we think about transmission, which is the institution that brings energy from a generation facility to your home, when you're able to turn the lights on, that's because it was transmitted to your space. When you see those large power lines, those are transmission lines. If we're able to harvest our own energy within our own communities, not only does that give us economic power to put energy back on the grid, but it also ensures that the energy we're using is not going to increase the economic burden of our homes. So when we think about that and we think about design and other ways across the world that they're incorporating microgrids, I got this conversation for hours, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of creativity that we can incorporate to make sure that our communities are well equipped to not only be employed, but also to make sure that we have access to clean energy, clean water, and clean soil. Urgency. Maryland's commitment to energy expansion and infrastructure, the lack of energy generation, and cooling and heating centers within environmental justice communities. Throughout the DMV, there's different terms that's being used, whether it's environmental benefit districts like we're seeing in Maryland, whether it's green zones like we're seeing across the West Coast and now being incorporated within DC, or resilience hubs. But for the short version, a cooling and heating center is a facility that's set on one parcel of land or a lot of land. And this is an area that communities can come to free of charge when their heat goes out or it's just too hot. So they need an area to relax, or they need an area that the heat burden is not going to be too exasperative. One of the things that we see in our communities throughout the region or throughout the state in particularly is dehydration is severe, starvation is severe, especially when we think about food not being equitably accessible. So making sure that these cooling and heating centers, which is usually ran through community centers or led through community partners, are available, accessible, and diverse in their location are all to ensure that we're able to live in a more just environment. So going over in these last couple of minutes, our personal program objectives for our CEEJH policy, our opportunities are prioritizing accessibility and going across language barriers, creating an EJ scorecard. So we're able to identify the bad actors or the partners of bad actors when we think about policymakers, as well as youth-led EJ legislative cores like the conversation we're in right now. EJ built templates for the state of Maryland. We were able to be a significant partner in getting the Cherish bill across the finish line. Regional campaigns with our Mid-Atlantic Justice Coalition, which Maryland is also a part of, and then supporting and the next generation of leaders like yourselves. Our role, like I mentioned earlier, is to make sure that we're able to convene space. And myself is my role is making sure that we're all able to the short version is to make sure that I'm able to bring a planning praxis and equitable and environmental equitable praxis to urban planning and land use, because unfortunately, many of our communities are impacted by urban planning, but we still don't have a full understanding of how we can maximize or manipulate it to our advantage. For the fall solutions, threaten clean energy goals, community ownership and public health, and EJ legislative momentum exist. One thing I would like to highlight is to make sure this middle one is prioritized. I think it is imperative when we think about land and how land has been excluded from us. And when I say that, I mean our ability to be involved in how it is developed, whether that means that we are in positions to own it and then design it and it become housing or commercial space that immediately fits our needs. When we think about urban heat island effect and making sure that we're able to reforest our communities, when we think about mortality deserts and making sure that we have enough healthcare, accessible healthcare in our communities. And if it needs to be owned, then so be it by us. I think that at some point, policy has to prioritize our health first, but also has to do it in a way that doesn't degrade the health of the planet. And that's what these two bills are meant to accomplish. And with that, I appreciate you all for your time and let me know if you have any questions. I didn't go over, right? Okay.
Thanks so much, Frederick. Pardon me, y'all. Do we have any questions for Frederick? I know you heard a lot about the two bills.
Three bills.
Well, yes, the three bills, because Cherish is split in two this year. That said, I am going to turn our chat. I'm sorry, I'm going to turn our session over to Ms. Lindsay Mendelson, who is with the Maryland Sierra Club. And Lindsay is going to talk with us about the TCA, Transit Climate Accountability Bill.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And it's so good to see all of you here today. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to present on the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act. And I do have an exciting update about it. Today, the bill passed the House of Delegates, so it is moving, it is advancing, and we really hope to see it get to the finish line this year. So before I kind of tell you, I thought I would actually show you some of what TCA is all about by sharing a video with you. So I'm going to play a video here for you, and hopefully you'll be able to hear the sound and everything okay. And with that, we can get started.
We're talking about the Maryland TCA bill. You do know what TCA is, don't you?
Is it the Teen Choice Awards?
Is it the Train Collectors Association?
Is it the Television Critics Association?
While these are all real, In this video, we're going to talk about the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act.
There are two main components of this bill. First, it requires MDOT to evaluate the climate pollution impacts of major transportation projects and ensures the state's transportation spending is aligned with our climate goals. And second, it requires that new major highway expansion projects over $100 million be designed from the beginning to offset pollution by pairing those projects with multimodal investments like transit, pedestrian, and bicycle infrastructure. This bill is prospective and does not apply to projects already funded for construction or with a NEPA record of decision. So why do we need to plan differently? The current transportation system is not meeting the needs of Marylanders and does not work equally well for everyone. Transportation is the second largest household expense for most Maryland families, and it is also the largest source of climate pollution in our state. At the same time, the status quo of endlessly expanding our highways has not solved.
Sorry, hopefully it will play here.
Congestion, and it is extremely expensive to build and maintain. These projects strain our state budget and worsen the quality of the air that we breathe. They also decimate precious farmland, hollow out our main streets, and disconnect neighborhoods and communities to the detriment of our small businesses, working families, and students. If you're hearing this and thinking this sounds like a terrible return on investment, you would be correct. And that's why this bill is trying to change course. That is the purpose of the TCA.
My name is Patricia Monroe, and I live here in the Oxon Hill, Fort Washington area. If the TCA existed now, it would be a great help financially for some people. It would also save people time in their commutes, which will allow them to spend more time with their families. The transportation in this area is really bad, and one of the things that they need to focus on is the fact that we need smart growth, and we need transportation that will be equitable for everyone in this area.
In other states where they have put this bill into action, they've actually created a myriad of other transportation options for people that are cleaner, are greener, and have the added benefit of saving money, which is really amazing, like in Colorado and in Minnesota. And we want to do that here. So how is it that you can help? You can get to know what the bill does. You can look at who it is in the Budget and Tax Committee on the Senate side, and honestly, all of your members, because we hope once it gets out of that committee, then everybody will have an opportunity to consider it on the Senate floor. And so we'll need support there too. Creating these investments in public transit and bike and pedestrian infrastructure really will be a wonderful, wonderful thing for all of us.
Take action today to support the TCA. Visit the website tmtcoalition.org/TCA.
So hopefully you were able to hear pretty well for that video, but I think that encapsulates a lot of the purpose of what TCA does and why we're fighting for it. And in terms of how this bill is related to environmental justice, it's related to environmental justice for a few different reasons. So one, we know the legacy of highway expansion has resulted in further deepening racial disparities. We've seen time and time again that unfortunately highways are often located near communities of color, and especially because of decades of redlining and racial segregation, there's more toxic air pollution in those communities. And so when we build and we expand highways, we're already further burdening communities that are already experiencing high levels of ozone or smog pollution, particulate matter, and other really nasty pollutants that people should not be breathing in. And the other thing that is really important here is it's not just fighting the bad projects, but it's also focusing on building better. So there are so many different projects out there, whether it's the Be More bus plan and the Red Line in Baltimore. Baltimore hasn't seen a transit expansion since the 1990s when the light rail was initially built in the North-South corridor. And for many, many years, a lot of advocates who've been really pushing for more transit investments have often seen that there's billions of dollars that are pumped into these highway expansion projects. Last year, we actually raised more revenue for the Transportation Trust Fund that basically funds our transportation needs across the state. And yet we're still not seeing those investments. It's actually still being flat in terms of transit investments versus, we saw a lot more money going into state highway administration. Some of that money is for, walkable and bikeable streets, but a lot of it is still going towards these expansion projects. There was just one added just this last year, $115 million added to the I-97 expansion in Anne Arundel County that's opposed by the city of Annapolis. It's opposed by the council member who represents most of the constituents that are impacted by this. And the city has said, there's so many other things that we've been asking for, all these transit improvements, all these walkable and bikeable improvements, and these are not happening because instead we've been focusing a lot of our attention on these expansion projects that frankly do not solve congestion. Another example that we've seen recently is a lot of groups, the South County Environmental Justice Coalition. I know I see Stacy on this call, who is also a part of this, is that we were pushing to oppose the Southern Beltway expansion for the last few years. And I know that the community meetings were completely packed with folks saying how, adding more lanes to the Southern Beltway over the Woodrow Wilson Bridge would move the traffic bottleneck from Virginia into Prince George's County. It would result in more traffic being dumped onto different communities to local roads. And this is in an area where there's Highway 210, known as the Highway of Death, because there's so many traffic safety implications. And so instead of building these really horrible projects, instead, it really should be about what the communities want, what they need, how to improve mobility, making sure that people have a way to get from point A to point B with other cleaner transportation choices. It doesn't mean that we're saying people have to get out of their cars, but more people want choices. We've done polling and it shows that 88% of people across the state, including rural areas, want more options to take transit, to walk, to bike, or carpool, or other ways. And the current status quo is just not working. We're seeing these household costs, $16,000 per year for households to pay for the cost of cars and car insurance and all the other things that really come from our car dependent infrastructure. So TCA is really about changing the status quo of how we're planning those projects so that it's really focused on the better planning. How can we get from point A to point B using these other options? And unfortunately, this past fall, the federal administration actually said that as a part of the National Environmental Policy Act, when these big projects are being built, that agencies are no longer required to look at climate change or environmental justice impacts as part of their studies. And so as a state, we really need to be making sure that we're not only encouraging, but we're requiring our agencies to look at these things very carefully and thoughtfully as they're looking at these big transportation projects and how they're moving people. And in terms of where the bill is right now. So you saw the video. There were actually two of the House sponsors, Delegate Edelson, who spoke at the beginning, and Senator Hettleman. Now that the bill has passed the House of Delegates, it is moving over to the Senate, where there was already a hearing. And so reaching out to members of the Budget and Taxation Committee, especially, or just reaching out to any of your senators, letting them know why this is really important to you, telling them why, first of all, reducing pollution, reducing tailpipe pollution, but also what are the types of transit, walking, and biking projects that you want to see, and why, with the status quo and the systemic change with the status quo that we have now, we're not able to fund a lot of those projects because we've been putting so much of that attention on these highway projects. So with that, I'll stop there and I'll turn it back to Nicole.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. We appreciate you. Does anybody have any questions for Lindsay before we move forward? All right, seeing none, we are going to move on to our next presenter. And the next presenter is not only going to share with us about an upcoming bill. He's going to, Dustin, correct me if I'm wrong, you're going to share about the data center uh, energy accountability bill, and then you're going to share about um, the lobbying and versus advocacy process. Yes?
I believe Brittany has a video for you all that
Oh,
she may have
that's right.
sent
She
to you.
did have a video. My apologies. Well, we do not actually have that video. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next part of the program and have you share with us about the lobbying process.
Of course. Let me just make sure I have screen share access here. Give me 1 second, y'all. All right. So, my name is Dustin Branch. I am the Baltimore Regional Coordinator with CEEJH Action Fund. I'm calling from downtown of the greatest city in America, Baltimore, to talk about how to advocate on your own or with a community coalition. So we're 3 months now into 2026, and certainly for myself, and I'm sure for many of you, every single day, it feels like there is always something happening. There's a lot of stuff going on in the news right now, but whatever the issue is, and however that can make you feel, there's a lot of folks out there who thought that they were the only one who felt that way, or were going through that experience, or even worse, it can just get to be so much where you get discouraged and you just give up. Oh, I don't get into politics. I don't do that. I don't know. But it's that kind of isolation that can really the opponents of positive community-driven change. That's where they really thrive. So what can we do to make change and to make our voices heard? And even though one person really can make a difference, a community is what can build a movement. So in this slide, in this example, you can see people from different organizations, different groups, some students, some advocates, people from all experience levels coming together on the steps of the State House in Annapolis. So in this picture, I see on the right here, Jews United for Justice. I see some of our own board members here at CEEJH, but really just folks from all walks of life coming together. And in this example, they had 150 supporters coming together. They formed a coalition and they won paid family leave against astounding opposition from across the board. And it really goes to show what people power can achieve. And so even though we've heard about many critical bills here tonight, wherever your advocacy takes you, either in this legislative session, we've only got less than a month left now, knowing where to go and how to make these political and legislative systems work for us is really the first step in growing the kind of people power that achieves these kinds of victories, and the kind of victory that we just heard about on the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act. So first, I would like you all to take a look at the Maryland General Assembly website. So this is where every single bill gets posted, not just this year, but for sessions all the way back to the 70s and 80s. Every hearing, every floor session is live streamed through this website, sometimes on YouTube, but through the website, of course. It's also where you can find out who your legislators are and how to contact them. You can also sign up to submit testimony, whether it's speaking in Annapolis, sending in a letter, or just adding your name in support or opposition to a bill that is being considered. To get in touch with your legislator, what you want to do, go to that mgaleg.maryland.gov website, and you can scan this QR code, and I can put this in the chat when we're wrapped up as well. But go to the upper left-hand corner there, where it says members, and find my representatives. You'll add your address and your zip code to find out your state senator And most people have anywhere from 1 to 3 delegates. There are 47 legislative districts in Maryland, 47 senators, I believe 141 delegates. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it has their office number in Annapolis. If it is during the summer interim, so legislative session for that year has passed, we're between legislative sessions, you'll get the information for their district office, their phone number, and email, all the information that you will need to contact that legislator. Now, when you're actually meeting with legislators, what you can do, you can just go straight to their office. A lot of the time they may be in committee, depending on the time of day, or on the floor. So you may be meeting with a member of their staff. We were just in Annapolis yesterday to talk about the rising risk of data centers on our communities. And that's called drop-in lobbying. You can also schedule meetings. Right now we're scheduling meetings for our CCAN Climate Student Lobby Day next Friday. So we're scheduling meetings with legislators. You can send them an email, give them a phone call, and see what time they're available. But when you're in a meeting, a lot of the time it's very low key, especially as a constituent and a community member. They want to hear from you. They want to know. Here in Baltimore, whenever the wind blows, the traffic lights just go to four-way stops. They're just always flashing. And in my meeting yesterday, they were very, very interested to hear that, so they can follow up with the city agencies, because they're dealing with it on their own as well. So it's always okay to not know an answer to a specific question, not to know any specifics on a bill. You can always just say you'll get back to them with some additional information. You can ask an advocate or an organizer for the answer that the legislator has. You should also send them a thank you note to continue that relationship. A lot of the time, once you meet your legislator or know who you're looking for, you'll see them around the neighborhood getting groceries. I saw my senator downstairs of my apartment building, because there's a really cool grilled cheese spot that they used to have down here. So you never know. To submit and sign up for testimony, you will have to create a MyMGA account. So that's that fourth option there on the upper right-hand corner of the screen. That is where you will track the progress of an individual bill. You can sign up to testify within the period that each bill, according to its committee rules, is available to be signed up for testimony. So most committees, they only open it for 48 hours before the bill is being heard in a committee meeting between 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So if you have a bill that you're really looking at, make sure that you not only know which committee it's being heard in and when, but also what are the rules of that committee? How do they want that testimony to be submitted? Because sometimes those rules may change. You want to, if you're writing a letter, submit a PDF of your testimony, including the bill number, your name and address, so they know which district you're contacting them from, especially if one of your legislators is on that committee. You should clearly indicate whether you support, oppose, or support with amendments that bill, and just state your position and why you support or oppose in plain language and using your personal story. I'm not sure if we have time to share this video, but I can drop it in the chat as well once I'm
you have a little
here.
time, Destin.
All right, let me see if it will let me share my audio. I don't know if I, let me just restart my screen share here. Here we go. They always change things on Zoom. Let's see.
Last person, thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the Ways and Means Committee and fellow community members. My name is Hannah Oluni. I am a sophomore at Richard Montgomery High School and a board member of the Women's Student Leadership Organization, MoCo and PowHer in Montgomery County. It's pretty ridiculous that I'm giving this testimony today in the year 2020, but I have to. Because even though menstrual hygiene, as rightfully deemed by the United Nations, is a human right, it is still an inaccessible one for students. A State of the Period study commissioned last year by the nonprofit Period found that 1 in 5 menstruating teenagers in the US struggles to afford menstrual products or is unable to purchase them at all. So it only follows logically that when menstruating students don't have access to pads and tampons, whether that be as a result of financial hardship or simply a lack of access, we are going to miss class. This may mean texting a friend and waiting in the bathroom for 10 minutes until they are able to miss class and deliver one to us, or it may mean going on an uncomfortable walk across the school to the nurse's office. Either way, I can say with absolute certainty that there are elementary, middle, and high school students across the state of Maryland that miss class every day because of a lack of access to menstrual products. This should not be normal. Keeping pads and tampons out of our school bathrooms is keeping girls and those who menstruate from receiving an equitable education. And it's not an impossible task either. California, New York, Illinois, and New Hampshire, as mentioned by Delegate Resnick, are just some of the states that have already enacted a legislation similar to HB 208. And there have been critics there and in our own state that have said that this bill and others similar to it are too costly, too dangerous, or an infringement on county autonomy. But the success of these states and the unanimous, unquestionable, and undying demand from our menstruating students across Maryland prove that these are just sad excuses for a bill that has serious potential to relieve inequities in our educational system. Education is a direct investment in our children and in the future of this great state, and it is imperative that we ensure that there aren't barriers and paywalls standing in its way. The truth is that right now, menstruating products are a luxury reserved only for the wealthy, and this is preventing students from going to class. Every county in this state has room in their school budget for menstrual and educational equity, and we must enter this new decade knowing that we have done everything we can to fight for the basic human rights of our students. The solution, delegates, is right here in front of us, right now, and there is absolutely no reason that HB 208 should not be deemed favorable. Thank you.
Right. That was very powerful testimony on a very important human rights issue. Oops, here we go. Let me just get back to that slide. And I think these tips that we have here, she really embodied each and every one of those. Keeping your testimony brief, 1 to 2 minutes. You're statutorily entitled to up to 2 minutes of testimony. You can say whatever you like, but please keep it as professional as possible. You don't want to read your written testimony straight from the paper. You want to speak directly from your heart. You want to dress professionally and appropriately. You don't have to wear a full suit, but just make sure graphic tees, anything like that. You want to introduce yourself briefly, let them know where you're coming from, speak respectfully and avoid redundancy, and stress your personal experiences and expertise. State your qualifications. I think you all are very qualified to speak on the issues that you care about, but making sure that they know those qualifications as well is really critical towards giving the best testimony possible. In our last slide, second to last slide here, you definitely want to stay informed. Maryland Matters is probably one of the best ways to keep on top of what's going on in Annapolis, around the state, and nationally. Maryland Reporter as well, which aggregates all of the different news sources, Baltimore Sun, I think Dave Smith's Fox 45, whichever news outlet that you read, and many others, they put them all together as it pertains to Maryland, and of course the MGA website as well. You also want to make sure you are registered to vote. Primary elections are coming up very, very soon. The number of people, I think about a third, 2/3 of people vote in the general election. I think 2024 is about 2/3 the American population. Even fewer, probably a quarter or a fifth of that, are folks who actually participate in the primaries, which decides which candidates are going to be on the ballot for each party line. They decide if there are any ballot initiatives, if those pass towards the broader November ballot. Getting involved in primaries and in general elections and even off-year municipal elections, depending on your locality, is very, very important towards making your voice heard. And people in the political, the realm, the beltway, they make their decisions, their funding decisions. I think every single year, every election year is the most expensive election on record. And they decide where they're going to put money, where they're going to put resources, and where they're going to put their attention. So making yourself heard and becoming a voice and a force is really, really critical at every stage, whether it's legislative session, election season, or in between. You always also want to make sure that your friends and people that you know are registered to vote, and everything is up to date as well. Many folks registered 10, 20 years ago, never updated their address, never updated anything. And when they finally do go to vote, they might get turned away at the polls. And that is the last thing that you want, especially if you've been waiting in line for hours. You also want to keep up with the local elections. But if you have, let me just read this here. It is so tricky to screen share and read off the slides here. But if you have a state ID and are 16 or older, you can complete your voter registration or pre-register right now. You can go to vote.gov or your local board of elections. And here are some resources as well for you, and I'll be happy to share those in the chat.
Thank you so much, Dustin. I do want to ask if anyone has questions for Dustin, but before we do, um, please forgive me. I did not see the video that Miss Brittany Baker sent to me. I have the video from Brittany Baker that talks about the data center energy accountability bill. So we're going to play that video really quickly, and then we'll move into questions.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brittany Baker, Maryland Director of Chesapeake Climate Action Network, recording this video from the Annapolis State House. And I just wanted to share with you a little bit about the bills that are moving forward in the legislature regarding data centers. Now, it is that time of legislative session where some bills are still standing alone, but others are getting pulled into other pieces of legislation as we consolidate and prepare for crossover, which is a time when any bill that hasn't made it out of one chamber is officially considered as a dead bill. And so one bill that we're supporting at Chesapeake Climate Action Network is Delegate Charkoudian and Senator Hester's Large Load Demand Response Program, which is a bill that will incentivize data centers to bring more of their own clean energy, and also requests for them to lower their energy usage on peak demand days. Because one of the ways that data centers stress out the grid and also increase utility costs is on the hottest of hot days and the coldest of cold days. They use a lot of energy when all the rest of us are using energy as well. And peak demand drives the energy grid that we build. It drives costs. Everything that we do for the energy grid is really built around this idea of peak demand. So how much energy is needed on the days that we need it most. So ensuring that data centers are better grid neighbors on peak demand days is one of the ways that we can ensure that they don't drive up costs for customers and that they take on a lot more of their own costs as we're connecting them to the grid.
Great video by Brittany, everybody. So Ms. Brittany Baker is Maryland Director at Chesapeake Climate Action Network, now also known as CCAN, where Dustin's colleague as well. So let's take it back to Dustin. Do we have any questions for Dustin? At the moment, I see Miriam. Please go right ahead.
Hello, Dustin. Thank you for the nice talk. I wonder if students have a role, for example, to register the elderly people to vote in their community or at their homes. Are they allowed legally, or they can help in this process?
Yes, and that's that's a really really important thing when you have someone someone that that you trust or who trusts you. Um, there's so many commercials, all this stuff, but register to vote, 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 all this stuff. But coming from you, someone that you've shared a table with, that you've shared a memory with, that same message can make all the difference into spurring them to act. So if you're already registered to vote, you've been keeping on top of everything. Using that energy to go to somebody else that that needs that extra push or that that additional reassurance is really important.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam, for your question. Any more questions for Dustin before we do some closeout items tonight, or any other questions for any of our our bill advocates here? We still have Lindsay and Frederick with us. Oh, and Martha's still with us as well. So we have Lindsay, Frederick, and Martha still with us. Any questions for either of them before we close out? All right, and with that, I'm going to say thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Miss Stacy Hartwell, who is our sponsor for one of the sponsors for the Maryland HBCU Legislative Summit. And take it away, Miss Stacy.
Okay, well, guess what? For all your time you spent with us tonight, I've got some really great news. When Kristen gave her presentation, she shared with us that a big day in Annapolis is crossover. Well, it's also a big day for you because we're inviting you to Annapolis to share an evening with the legislators who are sponsoring these bills. It's really important that they see you. It's important that you're there because, believe it or not, as young future leaders, our legislators put a lot of stock in your words, in your voice, in your advocacy. So this is an opportunity for you to come and join us in Annapolis. We're going to be providing you with free transportation. We are going to feed you really well. And we have got some of the most awesome giveaways you could ever imagine. We've got Meta AI glasses. I don't know which I'm gonna get. We're gonna have like some of each, you know. We're gonna do the Oakley HSTN glasses. I'm learning all this stuff because you know that's not my jam. But so they're going to have the Oakley AI glasses, the HSTN glasses. We're going to have the Meta glasses. We're also going to have Nintendo Switch OLED 2s. And the big thing that we're going to offer for that evening is an opportunity for you to get a scholarship, to have a chance to get a scholarship for $1,500. All of this will come to you as a result of you participating in this event. So if you could tell your friends, bring other people with you. If there's room on the bus and they're registered, you've got to be registered. And you can get on the bus and come to Annapolis and spend the evening with us. And we really look forward to seeing you there. It'll be a great culmination to, you know, the first half of legislative session, taking us into, like I said, crossover. So we hope to see you there. And I'm trying to think if there's something else I want to share with you too that's important. Also, we named the delegates for the HBCU Climate Change Conference in New Orleans. They are going to be there to present on the 24th their experience in New Orleans. So I think you're going to want to see your peers on stage talking about their legislative advocacy from down in New Orleans. And we're going to share with you all of our social media hashtags and @ etc. So you'll be getting an email from us when we start our journey down to New Orleans for the conference. All right, everybody, have a great evening, and it's a pleasure as always to see you.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Before you guys leave, I do have one announcement. Big kudos and shout out to University of Maryland Eastern Shore. We are now in waitlist mode with UMES. So if there are any students on here from UMES that had not signed up and registered before, please contact me and I'll make sure that you know you're on the waiting list. Because your advisors, we've already gotten the bus and everything straight, but we are at capacity for the students at UMES. Yes, Miss Aprecia.
Can you send your email in the chat so I can reach out to you?
I will. I thought I responded to you though, but you are on our list of students. I'll put my email in the chat still. Okay, there we go. All right. Any other
Okay, thank
questions?
you.
You're welcome.
No, ma'am. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you, Harmony. All right. Good night, everyone.